Okay, so I'm Rhett Power at Forbes, and it is great to be here. Is this the final session tonight?
One more at 8.
Okay, so we're almost at the end of the day here at Greek House Davos 2022. I say that because I hope after this week we're back. Irene, are we going to be back in Davos in January? With a lot more support from business and government. No, anyway, let's get to some discussions about. Oh, there she was. She was running outside. So you advised the Prime Minister on economic affairs. Irene, I put you on the spot for a minute.
Whatever you want, I'm on your disposal.
I asked if we were going to be back in January with Greek House.
Of course, in a bigger place with a dining roof.
Okay.
Second roof, and we are going to have the best people with.
And are we going to have some Spartans up front? Parking.
No, we are sustainable without cars.
All right. So what is the role of government in creating an environment for economic development and entrepreneurship to create that culture where that kind of economic activity, particularly for young people who want to start businesses and be successful and stay in Greece, right? Not start a company and then decide
Come back to Greece.
and come back to Greece. How do we do that successfully?
So, thank you very much. First of all, let me thank Greek House Davos for this welcome, and it's great to be here. Great to have a house that is Greek. It was always embarrassing to walk around town in the snow and choose to go to the Namibia house or the Russia house. And so hopefully from now on, we will have a place we call home. And I want to thank the organizers. And also for the very kind invitation. For those who don't know me, my name is Alexis Patelis. I'm the Chief Economic Advisor to the Prime Minister. So I'm going to answer first a different question, similar to the one you posed. We're often asked, what are the best sectors to invest in Greece? And my standard answer is, there are no best sectors. The role of the government is not to pick where private capital should go or to do industrial policy. The role of the government, to answer your question, is to remove obstacles for investment, to create the infrastructure, the right tax incentives, and ultimately the right culture so that people do come back to Greece. We have 500,000 Greeks who left the country during the crisis, that they come back and they become entrepreneurs or work for a great company. We have a lot of great companies, and this is the objective. So a couple of things quickly to run down on my list. Taxes, we've reduced taxes on salaried income significantly. Social security contributions down nearly 4 points. Eliminated the so-called solidarity income tax surcharge. We have 15% flat tax for stock options. Dividend tax rate is now 5%. Capital, we basically have no capital gains tax in Greece for listed companies. And the corporate income tax rate down to 22%. We also have a special scheme for those who come back to Greece or relocate their jobs to Greece. Half their income is tax-free for 7 years. How about that? It's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
But it's not just that. The government also needs to create infrastructure. So a big complaint people had about Greece was digital infrastructure was not there. I don't know if you know this. Greece is was the third country in Europe to auction 5G, and 5G is now operational in the majority of the country. We have a big program for fiber connection, fiber to home, digitizing the Greek state, KYC, KYB, making everything simpler for people to operate. And then there is sort of a licensing aspect. We have here also the General Secretary, Ms. Thuku, who has a bill in Parliament to simplify the licensing for renewable energy projects. So simplifying licensing procedures is not a straightforward thing to do, particularly if you still want to keep standards intact. But it's something that the Ministry of Development, which I think we have the wife of the minister that's also been doing the same work, making it easier for people to start businesses in Greece. And then there is sort of changing the legal, let's say the institutional infrastructure. And I have some ideas that come to mind. The Minister for Education was in the trip to the United States and signed agreement with 30 US universities that are going to be offering diplomas in Greece, partnering with Greek universities.
That's big.
Education tourism is a no-brainer. Cyprus has, for example, a lot of students they've managed to attract from this part of the world, and why not Greece? The government has allowed and encouraged English language courses, and they have sort of appeared out of nowhere, and this relationship between Greek universities and American or other universities is very fruitful. It's a win-win situations for both sides. So the answer to your question is there's a lot for the government to do. It's not the job of the government to say where you should go or what you should do with your money. It's the job of the government to create the infrastructure, the legal infrastructure, the institutional infrastructure, the right tax incentives so that private entrepreneurship can flourish.
Thank you. That's a great answer. I know that there are a lot of international companies moving to Greece. I know that they're building operations there. Is there, and one of the things that came up in a discussion yesterday was that there needed to be some technical upgrades to the pipe that brings in the fiber optic and the internet. Is that a project that's on the horizon?
It's a project that's being implemented. So part of the RRF, the Recovery and Resilience Fund that the EU has created post-COVID, we call it Greece 2.0. Greece 2.0 includes a lot of digital projects. One of them is to strengthen the connectivity within the country, broadband, fiber to home, etc., particularly for the more remote areas, the islands. But there's also connectivity. I'm going to take an opportunity with your question and extend it to energy as well. We have a lot of need for a better grid, a stronger grid, connectivity within the country, with the islands, but also between Greece and other countries in the area. We have a project that's on the pipeline to develop an underwater cable between Greece and Egypt. So North Africa and the Middle East will be, in the future, amongst the cheapest renewable energy producers for obvious reasons. They've got tons of sand and sun, and we will want to be able to benefit from that, but also to create a hub in Greece to channel some of that energy to the rest of Europe.
We just had the Prime Minister of Kosovo here, and we talked a little bit about regional cooperation. Or is that something that you feel is a must for this administration, to have better partners in the region?
So I'm not going to talk about foreign policy, but it's not my thing. But I will say on economics, again, it's a no-brainer. Why would we not want to have good relations with all our neighbors? And
how do you do that?
By visiting the countries and embarking on dialogue. So this Prime Minister has adopted a very open foreign policy. We visited Saudi Arabia, UAE, Israel, Egypt, countries that might not have perfect relations amongst themselves, but where we can benefit. The Minister of Development was only recently in the UAE together with the Prime Minister and uncovered a number of deals, business deals. So there's no reason why we shouldn't do that. But there is also a geographical point, going back to the interconnectedness that we mentioned before, that in this world of where countries become more dependent and where some countries want to deglobalize, we want to be part of this grid and this system and make Greece an integral part of Europe, North Africa, Middle East.
What are some of those trade opportunities? Let's get a little specific on that. What do you see?
Just kidding.
Sorry. No, but we can talk about it in a big way. Like, what are some of those trade opportunities you see?
In general, so there's the obvious one is energy. We are shifting away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy.
Is that something you could ship? Is that something you could sell to other countries?
Absolutely. So Greece will transform itself from being an energy importer to being an energy exporter. We already have 3 times as many applications for renewable energy projects in Greece than we have needs for to achieve our targets in 2030. So The difficult here is implementation. Going back to what we said before, making it easier to do the licensing, and making sure that the projects have the financing, and of course the backing for when problems inevitably arise. But trade can also be interpreted in a broader sense. There's goods and there's services, and in services, Greece obviously is very strong on tourism, but tourism itself has many manifestations. There's sort of tourism where you go on vacation, but there's tourism, maybe you stick around for a week and go on holiday, but then you work for a week as well. Or there is education tourism that I referred to before. Silver tourism, we encourage pensioners to relocate to Greece. We have a 7% flat tax rate for those who shift their pensions to Greece. Or maybe medical tourism, to come to our hospitals to have an operation. So these are different types of services. But I would say, if I interpret your question a little bit differently and say, what is the comparative advantage of the country? It's obviously the geographical location. We've been blessed with beautiful landscape, weather, the sun, the sea, the mountains. You can ski in Greece. But obviously, in a world, well, you can, but in a world with where you can basically choose, for many of us who are fortunate enough, we can choose where we want to work. Why not work from Greece? It's sort of another slogan that we have. So services and service exports, so to speak, can take many different forms in this new age that we're in.
So let's talk about where we can improve. What are some areas of improvement that you'd like to see, or this administration would like to see?
In Greece?
Yes.
No, there are no. So there's a lot of ongoing projects. I mentioned that I would say there's a lot of ongoing projects that just take time. So the energy transition is one very good example of that. We all know where we're going to go, but it's going to take time. And there are going to be roadblocks on the way. Digitization is another one. There's many projects in the pipeline to digitize. You have to digitize court documents, digitize the cadastre, digitize everything. And the pension systems, the old pension systems. But all these things just take time and money, obviously. There's a big project to reform the justice system. Justice is too slow in Greece. It's not that it's not done well, it's that it just takes too long for your case to be heard. So there are many initiatives here, and improving the delivery of justice is not a project that has one simple solution. So I will give you the examples. Digitization is an obvious one, so that the judges and the staff don't have to spend all their time looking through documents. Consolidating buildings and consolidating courts and developing specialized courts who might have expertise in a particular topic is another example. Created so-called model cases where a court will try one case, and together with that case it will be relevant for all the other relevant cases, so that the courts don't have to rejudge the same case over and over again. Training the judges. There's a new stuff that's happening. And of course, they need to have better expertise, whether it's financial transactions or it's now the new energy transactions or whatever. Evaluation, better evaluating the judges and making sure that their promotion is done in a more meritocratic way. So this is an example of the many aspects of justice reform. I would say fighting tax evasion is another big bucket of initiatives that the government has. This is actually quite advanced. But again, like justice reform, fighting tax evasion does not have one single solution. You need to do a lot of things. Digitization is a large part of it. Having all the data available and automating processes so there's very little human involved, very little human interaction. COVID was actually a big accelerator of that development. We saw a very rapid increase in electronic transactions in Greece as elsewhere. And this had a side benefit of boosting tax revenues, because obviously a lot more of the transactions were reported.
Right.
And consolidating databases, making sure that there's enough staff in the tax authorities. There's a big shift as things get digitized to retrain and use the tax officials in different ways. Before they were just processing people's requests. Now it's much more centralized and they become a lot more specialized. So there's many different things that are ongoing.
That's great. Thank you. I was on a phone call, and I think I've said this a couple times today, with a bank analyst a couple of weeks ago, and he absolutely frightened me about the impending, in his view, deep recession. How is Greece?
Global recession.
Global, not just not just in Greece. Are you worried about that in any way? And how are you thinking of? What is your thinking now about that? And how are you planning to sort of mitigate the impact?
So our job is to make best of any given circumstances. And obviously we are not going to influence the global economy, and we're not going to change it. So the question is, just as during COVID, the country was hit with the same symmetric shock as other countries were hit by the war against Ukraine, etc. So there's sort of different themes that are ongoing in the global economy today. There's the inflation theme. The inflation has both risen faster than anyone would have expected, and to levels that we have not seen globally in decades. In response to that, we have an interest rate hike theme. So ECB's Lagarde mentioned yesterday in her blog post, for example, that the ECB will be hiking rates 25 basis points in July and September. The Fed obviously has already started hiking rates quite aggressively. And then you have, in a sense, what you were asking for as a result of the inflation and the interest rate hike theme. Are we going to get a global recession? And intertwined in all of this is the invasion of Russia into Ukraine and the spike in energy prices. So what we can say is that Greece, we believe strongly, will be resilient to those global themes. It is not my job to forecast or convey our forecast as to what will happen with the global economy, because I work for the government now. I'm not a private forecaster. But I can tell you that we strongly believe that Greece will be resilient. And sort of what is the argumentation here? It's pretty simple. It's that Greece is different. We went through a very long crisis the previous decade and have not developed the problems or the excesses that other countries might have. For example, if you look at credit, there's a whole generation in Greece that never took out a mortgage. I'm sure if you speak to the younger people in this crowd, they don't even know what a mortgage is. If you contrast that to other countries where we even saw in some countries negative rate mortgages where the bank would pay you to buy a house. They pay you every month some money. So don't think you have to be sort of a hardcore economist to say that if interest rates go up, they will have a much greater effect on that country than on Greece. Our government debt has a very peculiar characteristics. It's very unique. It has the longest duration of anywhere in the world, 20-year average duration, compared to, let's say, 5 years in the United States or 8 years in Italy. So that means we basically refinance our debt every 20 years. We have, in the sort of the flip side of this, low gross financing needs in the near term. And also, the bulk of the debt, the vast majority of the debt was swapped and is fixed today. The average interest rate we pay on the government debt is 1.4%. So
not bad.
Not bad. Yeah. So as interest rates go up globally, even though the headline nominal debt in Greece is high, our conjecture is that people will find that the extra interest rate burden on the budget will be much smaller than what people might first think. And of course, another sort of little dirty secret of this global inflation boom is that it also reduces the real value of debt. This year, for example, debt to GDP in Greece will decline sharply due to this unanticipated and unwelcome, of course, inflation shock. Similarly, on the there are other sort of aspects as well, I would say. The companies that have survived this brutal crisis that the country went through are, in many respects, the best in breed. You can imagine that if GDP declines 25%, and your company goes belly up, it's not necessarily your fault. But those that have survived this whole experience are pretty good companies that had some good management, that knew how to deal with such a crisis. And so hopefully we believe that the country will be resilient to what's happening to the global economy.
Thank you. One thing we haven't really discussed much today, unless I missed it, but is tourism. How is the war? I mean, it's hitting right at the beginning of the summer tourist season. What do you think the impact's going to be because of the war and maybe the people thinking that there's going to be a financial crisis? Do you think that this sector is going to be hit hard?
So the war itself, between the invasion of Russia to Ukraine, doesn't really have much of a direct impact. We have very few tourists from Russia and Ukraine. And so the direct impact is sort of negligible, and you can ignore it, actually. And the same goes with trade. Greece does very little trade with Russia. The indirect impact, I would actually argue that the main trend in global tourism today is a global shift from goods towards services consumption. So what happened during COVID is that large bunch of services, including tourism, shut down. And people still had decent disposable income, and so they spent that income as a greater share in goods. And we saw people go shopping online, and if you sort of plot any line of goods consumption in any country, it just spikes after COVID, and the opposite to services. Now we're seeing the reverse. So an economist will tell you that there is what they call intertemporal substitution of consumption. So basically, I bought 5 shirts during COVID. I don't need any more, so I'm going to go on a trip to Greece, is the answer to your question. There's a scientific term for that. It's called revenge travel. So
I like that.
It's not my term. I heard it somewhere else. But if you look at the data, we do monitor the data on a daily basis of arrivals, etc., and you will find that already arrivals into Athens airport are sort of where they were in 2019. And parts of Greece already have a record tourist season. So we actually think that this year is going to be pretty good.
One of the things I want to ask you about is there an opportunity, and maybe you're doing this, I don't know, to attract some of these international type conferences to Athens as a place, and things like Web Summit and other big tech summits like that, and these kind of events. Is that something that you're interested in doing?
We do. I was trying to see if we have someone from the Ministry of Tourism here, but we don't. Look, we do. Oh, sorry. There we are. Well, the answer is yes, but I would say that the country still could benefit from extra capacity. We have a very big project that's on the development phase that I'm sure you've heard about, the Hellenic project, which, when it's fully developed, will include concert halls and conference halls and hotels, and will create the capacity to host very large conferences in Greece.
Okay.
But obviously, we as a country want to diversify the types of tourism that we have, and conference tourism would be one of them.
Okay.
But there's different types, and we want to develop all of them.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
Answering your questions too quickly.
No, that's good. I'm out of them now, though.
Exactly. So we can ask the help of the audience.
Let's do. Anything from the audience? Oh, come on, don't be shy. Or do you have any thoughts that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, I do. So, sort of what are the standard questions that we get? Another area that we haven't touched upon is the financial sector and banks. So the country went through, after the crisis, the country had a legacy bank debt problem with NPEs over 50% of the loan book when this government took over in 2019. And through a scheme that's called Hercules, these NPEs have been reduced sharply, and this year we'll have single-digit NPEs. This was a very important development, obviously, because a bank that has bad loans is not going to make new loans. One piece of legislation that did not receive enough attention and is amongst the biggest reforms that the government has made is the so-called insolvency reform. So we have adopted the EU directive faster than other countries in terms of streamlining our restructuring and bankruptcy law. So when we talk about entrepreneurship before, part of entrepreneurship is failure. and you cannot succeed if you're not willing to fail. And in Greece, that meant eternal damnation in hell. So with this new law, there is a bankruptcy process which you can go through if all else fails. And of course, a restructuring process if your debts are to both a government and to the banks or private sector. Very important piece of legislation that also helps with another objective that Europe has, which is capital union, to homogenize and harmonize the systems so that those decisions can be made in the same way throughout. Last year, the two main banks, Piraeus Bank and Alpha Bank, also did large capital increases, 1.4 billion and 0.8 billion, respectively. And of course, now the main objective of the banks is to lend. In Greece 2.0, the Recovery and Resilience Fund, Greece is on the receiving end of 13 billion of loans, and we decided to channel those loans to the private sector because the country still has an investment gap it needs to fill. So what is happening is those 13 billion loans are being channeled, half of the money more or less through the four systemic banks, the other half through the EIB and EBRD. And we have identified 5 priority eligibility criteria to prioritize the loans. So you will get a cheap loan if your project is either green, number 1, or digital, number 2, which are the priorities also of the EU. If you are going to do research and innovation, number 3. If you are going to invest in exports, whether it's goods or services, that's number 4. And number 5 is mergers and acquisitions, because the country still has companies that have a relatively small size. So this is a big project. The 13 billion is actually the largest single item of any project of the Recovery and Resilience Fund in the whole of the European Union. And this started end of last year, and we have seen a lot of strong demand for those loans, and we hope they will help boost loan growth in Greece. I'm also going to talk about another objective that we have, which is that of investment grade. So the sort of final nail in the coffin, so to speak, of the crisis, because we've had a number of nails. The capital controls have been lifted. The IMF debt was repaid 2 years early. A couple of days ago, the Commission basically said that we're on the path of exiting enhanced surveillance, and the last bit that's missing is achieving investment grade. We are still targeting that in 2023. About a month ago, S&P upgraded Greece, which was a surprise to most analysts because it happened against the Ukraine war, against what you described about the threat of a global recession, etc. And now rates us 1 notch below investment grade. So there's S&P, there's DBRS and Scope, and hopefully there's going to be Fitch as well. They have 2 rating actions by the end of the year that will bring Greece 1 notch from investment grade. So one of these rating agencies, fingers crossed, we're going to cross that bridge in 23. What are the stuff that they're looking at? They look at 3 things, basically. They look at declining debt to GDP, which is an almost given this year, despite everything that's happened. They look at NPEs and the banking system. And as I described before, they're implementing their plans towards single-digit NPEs. They look at reforms. The government has passed over 300 bills through Parliament over the past 3 years, and there's actually, ministers often complain that there's sort of a queue of bills, and they won't get their bill voted through in time, because Parliament can only vote 2 bills a week, can't go any faster than that. And of course, political stability. And there will be an election next year. Next year is an election year in Greece, and we are confident that the current government will be re-elected. And in that sense, all these criteria, we're quite confident that the rating agencies will recognize this and bring Greece to investment grade. This will unleash capital that today might want to invest in the country, but is not allowed to by the terms of their own investors. So there's plenty of pools of capital that limit themselves to investment grade countries, and this will be a new pool of capital to direct itself to Greece.
That's huge. Talk about, and this will be our last question. Go ahead.
I was wondering what is risk position in crypto coins. I mean, I go up and down the promenade. house, which is full of people all the time, and I see the crypto thing being all around the place, and everybody's talking about it. So what is Greece's position about it?
In my old job, but before I joined the government, I was a analyst / strategist. I would have a very, let's say, pointed opinion about this. But today I work for the government, so I will give you the government opinion about it, which is, I think in general, cryptocurrencies are welcome in terms of the investment they can bring, and obviously there's a lot of projects out there. Some will fail, some will be successful. As I said before, it's not the role of a government to determine whether a particular project should fail or succeed. Having said that, we also work with the ECB and the regulators to ensure that this does not create systemic risk to the financial system, and also that that crypto is not used as a way to circumvent regulation, taxation, and money laundering. So there's sort of different aspects, and I will say that the role of the government is to make sure that this is a level playing field for everybody, and to make sure that crypto is not used for illegal activities, for criminals, for, as I said, tax evasion, money laundering, drug cartels, whatever the case may be. But otherwise, we're obviously very interested and in any investment, and we don't prejudge whether someone will succeed or fail.
I got to do a follow-up to that.
Experts say it's much easier to follow digital coins than real ones.
Well, the ECB is in the process of creating a digital euro. Now, I don't know how long it'll take and whether it'll be successful or not, but it is in the process of doing that.
I want you to help settle a debate. Maybe you can't, maybe you won't. I don't know.
I can't.
So last night at dinner, we were having a debate on whether crypto and NFTs are currency or are they assets.
So I will answer your question indirectly. This debate is not unique. It is being held in the United States in a very open way between the Security and Exchange Commission and between the Fed. Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting question, actually. I guess the intent of the founders of crypto is to create a currency. So in that sense, it should be, the remit of the central bank. But in the process of creating a currency, they've created an asset class. So that should be the remit of the regulator. I guess the cop-out answer to your question is both.
Okay.
So the aspects that relate to currency, meaning as a store of value, as a unit of transaction, etc., is in the remit of the central bank. And to the extent there are issues about adequacy of information for investors, suitability, front running, insider trading, blah 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 blah. Those are the remit of the regulator,
right?
Of the Security and Exchanges regulator.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Who's next?
We'll resume with our program in roughly 5 to 10 minutes. We need to reset the stage in the meantime, so enjoy another glass of wine or a snack.